So today we have something pretty special. We are doing a double outlaw Fury Warrior 20 Rookery. This was, I believe, unless I looked at the leaderboard wrong, this is a world world first double outlaw 20 Rookery. So we're gonna walk through the route, what we did right, what we did wrong, and just everything in between. So let's get into the run here. Starting off, naturally, we're going to have a larger first pull. But what a lot of groups do in these hierarchies is they also pull in like the Void Rider, for example, on the far left-hand side. Now it's on my right-hand side. But we don't because we're target capped. We have a Fury Warrior who's capped at 5, roughly. And then we have, of course, Outlaw who's capped at 8 with a pretty hard cap there. So getting into this first pull, I'm going to pull the right-hand side with Keg Smash, Breath of Fire, and then I'm going to roll into the center pack, making sure that I get Weapons of Order rolling, my Trinket, Ringing Ritual Mud, followed by Dampen Harm. And then once Dampen Harm expires, I am throwing up my Fortifying Brew. Rook guards do a lot of damage, but as you see my healing down on the right-hand corner, I'm doing about 3 mil. A lot of this healing is going to come from Guy Plin's Imperial Brew. So it's really important that you actually purify at the appropriate time. You don't really want to purify while you're full health, despite your stagger maybe leaning towards that 200%, if not higher mark, as I am right now, 277% stagger. That'll kill me if it keeps ticking. So well-executed Purifying Brews will generally keep the Brewmaster alive through this pull, but of course, single target healing from the healer is also appreciated. Once that pull goes down, and it was our Lust pull, we are heading across into the actual Rookery, the training grounds for the Storm Riders. Now, we do this room a little differently. I'm not really sure what VDH groups do. I've seen a couple different routes, but we're going to actually be pulling a lot of trash onto boss, only because it's the most efficient thing for this composition to do. So we're going to go patrol into the middle pack on the left-hand side. This is going to contain 6 mobs, playing in between the Fury Warrior and the Outlaw Rogue target counts. The big focus here is the Void Rider. During this run, I wasn't targeting it. But this pull can be pretty scary, but out of the first, second, and third pull in here, this is probably the most tame pull for the Brewmaster. So we're really only committing things like Weapons of Order here, and maybe the occasional Black Ox Brew if it happens to be up, and or if we need it. But most of the healing that we're going to need, or most of the survivability tools we need on this pull, is simply going to be our trinkets, Weapons of Order, as well as our just Celestial Brew and our base our base mitigation kit. As this pull starts to die, the main thing we're looking out for, there was one Thunderer and there was one Rook Tender. The Rook Tender will enrage one of the birds. You can soothe it, like we have access to Paralysis and Shiv, or you can simply kick it and then, of course, kick the Thunderers. And then this pull is going to be the same thing. It's patrol into the center left side pack, or right side pack, I guess. Rook Guard, Thunderer, but now this time there's 3 Rook Guards instead of 2. So a little bit more tank damage is going to come out, but there's been enough time since the first pull where I now have Dampen again. Fortifying Brew's coming up in a fair bit of time. I just committed Black Ox Brew, and I had my Trinket going into this pull. So I should feel pretty stable, but with the Rook Guards doing mostly physical damage, we're really going to rely on those Guy Plins as well as Celestial Fortune to carry us through this particular pack. Luckily, we do have very, very high sustained damage in this pull. Rogues were able to do almost 13 million DPS sustained to this pack. So it's kind of got deleted very, very quickly. Now, what's nice about playing the Fury Warrior, and this is something that we went back and forth on before the key started, was Arms does bring more AoE damage, but Fury brings a very nice sustained damage kit, and they bring a little bit more priority damage because they're typically targeting one mob, and they're kind of cleaving off of that mob, making sure that they're keeping frenzy stacks and stuff. So now we are going the right side packs in either corner while CCing out one of the Thunderers. And the reason for this is we want to make sure we're getting one of the Thunderers nice and low, if not killed off. And then when we're going to pull the other Thunderer in, we're going to go into boss, regardless of what trash is still up. There might be a few Rook Guards, but ideally the Storm Rook will be dead. So now that the Tender is at about 40% health, we actually chain in that other Thunderer using Ring of Peace, getting some kicks. Rogues are so tanky, and honestly, so is Fury Warrior, that honestly, a lot of these bolts, if they happen to go off, like Walks, for example, just only went to like 60% health, it's actually pretty safe. The only problem is when you do pull boss onto trash, or trash onto boss, however you want to phrase it, any overlapped damage can be lethal. And so that's when you really want to make sure you're kicking, like when we have to spread for the Wild Lightning or the Crash Thunder. or the Lightning Torrent. So kicking this guy, bringing him in, and then I'm going to get a touch of death right before the beam comes out. And we are now playing nice and close. Remember, there's 2 packs in this room that are still active. And if we happen to move too far away from the boss from the middle here, for example, like my back right shoulder has 3 Thunderers, that will pretty much be a guaranteed wipe, and we don't need the count. So we are kind of just playing it safe here. And now we're playing on the, I guess the right-hand side, or the entrance of the room is now where we're located. So at this point, we are just doing the fight now per usual. We are going to pull in another pack in a little bit. But for the most part, we're just doing as much single target damage as we possibly can. This boss is obviously, well, it's very simple. Has a lot of, I have issues with this boss just because it's so mundane. It's basically spread, dodge, and then you have like a rotating intermission. And for how beefy this boss is, it's like nice that it's easy, but because of how high the damage can get with some of its mechanics in this higher key level, it's hard to pull things onto the boss. And then also the trash in this area is just really clunky to deal with. The Storm Rooks, for example, very rarely move when they're casting Energizing Barrage. You know, there's a lot of kicks, there's a lot of casters that have like a decent range on their abilities, because Blizzard, that was like Blizzard's new philosophy is like increase the range on casters so you can't just outrange things. And so as a melee composition especially, it's very difficult to like keep the packs stacked on the boss and be rotating around the room and moving all the time. So this boss has a lot of issues. I'm glad it's not coming back in the next season. I am more than happy to not have to revisit this dungeon for several years, if they ever bring it back. But this is a nice way to go out. I don't think we're going to be doing anything higher than this. Anyways, we did pull trash on the boss. Kind of simple. There's just 1 Rook Guard, 2 Rook Tenders. Rook Tenders don't do a lot of damage, but they do cast that in rage. Again, we do have shivs, so just in case we do happen to miss a kick because of some other mechanic that's happening, we can always soothe it. But in this case, we have each person assigned to a kick. We make sure we kick when we can. And here's that Stormrook trying to come in. A benefit about playing Rogue as well, on top of having a Warrior Night Elf, is that the Stormrook, we can mitigate a lot of the damage. If it's channeling Energized Barrage on any player, Vanish and Shadow Meld can just totally alleviate that. And because we had some kicks in the pull, I guess not in this pull in particular, but generally if we have Thunders in the pull, our Shaman is getting a nice big nature DR from that. And so now with the final trash pack that we need for count cleared, this is simply a single target boss fight. So we're going to actually fast forward a little bit here because this fight it's so hard to talk about. And let's get into the next part of the dungeon. One thing you notice us do there is we actually moved to one side of the boss, or try to make sure that melee has room to continue doing damage uptime. But boss finally goes down, we jump down, we grab a feather using dash to counter any kind of fall damage we take there. We now have slow fall, and now all of us have kind of like assigned or pseudo-assigned rook buffs that we're going to pick up. This does some scaling nature damage. It's just free damage that's going to make some of these pulls go by a little bit faster. Is it worth getting for your average key? Probably not, but we knew that this was going to be a very tough key, so we had to play this extremely well, and we were going to utilize any damage buffs we could get. So this pull can be pretty lethal. Luckily, the boss fight wasn't scary for the tank at all, especially at the end once trash was done, where now I have things like Dampen Fort, Celestial Brew, Black Ox Brew, Diffuse Magic. All of these tools are now available for me to mitigate some of this damage. We could have pulled bigger here, but if we pulled any bigger, it would have immediately gone to a 9-target pull, which is inefficient for both Outlaw Rogues and obviously for Fury Warriors. So by pulling slower but quickly, we're able to dispatch certain mobs that could be dangerous, or we don't have to actually make a pull more dangerous than it needs to be, because we don't have to pull in an extra caster to like coordinate a bunch of kicks. We pull one caster, we focus the caster, it dies, we pull the next caster. It's a very kind of easy strategy. It makes it so there's a lot less coordination, which is really beneficial, and it allows players to really focus on doing just as much damage as they can, or in this case, trying to roll 5 buffs, because that's ultimately what this is going to come down to, is how good can our rogues roll throughout the whole instance. Now we're trying to get this Oracle down the stairs. Unfortunately, the Ring of Peace did something kind of goofy and kept knocking the Oracle up instead of like out and away. This next pull is pretty tame. It's the same thing that we've been seeing: an Oracle, a Rook Guard, a Crusher, and a Diffuser. Couple of scary things going on here. The key to this is when this kind of suck, I forgot the name of the ability, is going out. If you don't have a good defensive, You ideally line of sight the arcing void, which is that giant circle around a targeted player. You can simply move behind a pillar and it'll try to recast, and you try to delay the damage until there's no group damage going on. Then once the group damage is done and you're topped off, you can let it go off and it's not that lethal. Outside of that, there's nothing much in this pull. You can stun the Crushers mid-leap to prevent their damage, but it's fairly min-maxy. Their cast is, like their leap cast is really fast, so it's kind of hard to do. Now, before we get into the big pull, I do want to mention why this dungeon was so difficult. Being target capped means you can't really pull that big, and Outlaw Rogue is extremely contingent on rolling good buffs a lot. And so their damage can be good or bad, and it's going to make the last boss fight nearly 7 minutes long. And when you have a 7-minute boss encounter, that ends up being like 25% of the entire dungeon. So we need good luck and a lot of time going into the final boss. And that's it. Like, we're going to have to do multiple burn phases. I'm kind of spoiling a little bit here. And so our goal is to get to that boss as fast as possible so we have the most time allocated to it. Anyways, this pull can be pretty lethal. The Stormrook buff is definitely going to help us get this pull down, making sure we lock down bolts, using Ring of Peace to displace them out of that so we can continue having good uptime. Luckily, this comp, despite not having any range in it to make the pull easier, both our rogues are extremely tanky, and they both have immunities with Cloak of Shadow, so they can maintain high damage here, where a lot of classes lose a significant amount of damage trying to do this pull. Now, the idea for us is to focus down the skull-marked diffuser, but we are also trying to cleave and, ideally oracles die quicker, because the quicker they die, the easier the pull gets. Now that one diffuser went down, the other one's still at 15-ish%. Luckily, we are playing the Fury Warrior. I think if we were playing like arms, it might have not died as quickly. Fury Warrior, like I mentioned before, has this nice kind of kit where, yes, they're super capped on damage, and I think the class needs kind of a redesign, but the target they pick and they choose to hit, especially if it's a beefier target like a diffuser, that target will die. Like, they have kind of prio damage because of the way that their class plays. You want to hit the same target to maintain higher stacks of haste through frenzy, and obviously you cleave off of that target anyways, and so you pick a target and just do your rotation. It's pretty chill. Anyways, we are pulling 4 Crushers into boss. Now, this is a pretty scary pull for the tank, specifically Brewmaster. I don't have many defensives because I used a lot of them on the last pull. We still have a lot of civilians active, and we're target capped, so I'm kind of waiting to pull. Celestial Brew gets committed, and now it's just kind of a game of playing alive. Once all of the civilians die, now we're going into this pack with 3 Crushers, since one of them died, and they're kind of gonna taper off. They're gonna die, because I pulled them in a staggered fashion. They're gonna die in a staggered fashion. Now, in a different run that I did in a different 20, now ideally I would have Touch of Death for one of these Crushers. It drops Stagger, gets me a damage boost, but unfortunately Touch of Death isn't up for another 7 seconds, and all our Crushers are now dead. And now we are on Stormguard Goran. This guy's pretty simple. The meta strat for like the top groups that run DK is you just every other debuff, you can pretty much pass to your DK with AMS, and it just immunes it, so this guy becomes like pretty much a target dummy. We don't have the luxury of doing that, but what we did do here that just happened is CL cloaked and he high rolled. So you can't tell who it's going on, but if you pop an immunity like Cloak of Shadows and it happens to go on you, you'll remove the debuff. So he took basically a 20% gamble and he won. And so CL removed that mechanic. We were kind of, pogging out, but at the end of the day, it's not a scary mechanic for this group. Our rogues are super tanky. Our warrior has a lot of health and also has like passive leech in their kit through things like Bloodthirst as well as Second Wind. And then myself, I can generally take 2 debuffs, and of course our shaman can hit Astral Shift if it ever happens to go on him as well. And so the idea is that if it goes on me, I'm going to pass it to any of our DPS, and then they're going to pass it back, then I'm going to give it to a new DPS. So basically we stagger it onto 3 people. And then on the flip side, if it starts on a DPS, they're going to pass it to me. I'm going to pass it to a new DPS, and then that DPS I pass it to will pass it back to me, and I will always go to 2 stacks of Chaotic Vulnerability. I am running Ringing Ritual Mud for a lot of reasons. The start of the dungeon is really lethal when it comes to the Rook Guards. This boss is also extremely lethal, and some packs downstairs can be scary with some overlaps with like Festering Void and stuff. So using that trinket, you can actually mitigate a ton of damage. Diffuse is really strong on this fight as well, that you can use every like 3rd cycle. Dampen isn't great, but you have a lot of tools in your kit, and you shouldn't need to use the defensive on the first stack of vulnerability. You should only ever have to use it when there's a second application, when the chaotic corruption is back on you when you're vulnerable. And now the other important thing about this fight, especially as a melee group, is baiting these circles properly. So ideally we bait circles near old circles, and then we move away, keeping one side of the room clear at kind of all times. So our healer just passed it to me, for example, and this is going back to the debuff. I'm passing it to our rogue. One of our rogues now walks, is going to pass it back to me. I'm going to get that second stack. I have Fortifying Brew active. I can defuse if I feel like I need to, but I'm looking very healthy. Debuff's gone. We're good to go. And so this fight is, again, rinse and repeat. There's nothing really going on here. So once again, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. So here we are in the last couple percent. We're going to pseudo tunnel here. I have Touch of Death, so I actually moved back in and just touch him. Most of us were running out to play it safe, but not a big deal. And then we are trying to get into this next pack right away. We do have a few people. I believe our rogue and our shaman are running Kazan, so we are trying to maintain a consistent pace throughout the run, making sure that we're able to maintain combat so they can maintain stacks, so we have the most amount of damage possible. I'm not running Kazan in here, mostly because of the pulls that I was scared of the most. I wouldn't have that trinket stacked up high enough for, so I opted to use things like Sephorium Pacemaker and Ringing Ritual Mode like I mentioned before. This pull is kind of just like a homework pull. Like you can't really improve this pull all that much. It's just 3 targets. Crushers can go down. You have to kill the Ascendant before you can go downstairs. I wish there was a world where you can skip this pack, or if there's a way where you can snap things down. Now, unfortunately, these mobs have very similar health pools, so even when you're just trying to focus down the Ascendants, the Crushers will die, but if you somehow have a lot of funnel, you can snap these Crushers down when they're still alive, if you do it properly. Now, I'm not going to showcase it here, but ideally you want to jump down beneath and then move directly below the Crusher so they snap down to you. So there's a kind of a weird movement thing you have to do with that, but for the most part, we're good. Now, everyone made the jump except for one of our rogues, but that's totally fine because he can just grapple across. You might have just seen that in the corner there. And then by crackling Jade this Ascendant, it's able to pull without the civilians. This is once again going to play into the strength of the Outlaw Rogue and the strength of the Warrior. Keeping pulls smaller and chaining things in tends to be a lot stronger than it is by just trying to do really, really, really big pulls, where I could die, where a Rogue could die, where there's just too much going on, the damage is capped, the civilians live too long. And so now we're pulling this corner pack, which will add another 5 targets to the 4 target pull. While it is 9, the civilians are non-elite mobs, so they die really, really, really quickly. And so once these civilians die, we'll chain in the last pack that was with the Ascendant. That civilian pack's a little bit bigger, but again, it's not going to be a big deal. Here we go, Crackling Jade tagging the civilians. We're watching out for orbs still, just being a little careful. And then we're going to try to stack these up as best as we can. Again, target count's a little high, but civilians have low health, so they should die off pretty quickly. Now, the big scary thing here is that the Crushers are applying a Healing Absorb to me, which can be pretty scary. I'm at 13 stacks now. What I should be doing is I should have dropped this ring a little bit sooner. I tried healing here, and it felt like it wasn't very efficient. I almost went down. Link was committed, but it did not hit me, so I'm still sitting at half health. I finally realized that Link was down, so I moved back into it. But it was really the Healing Absorb that was actually giving me the most problems, which I didn't notice until watching this back after the run. So do be careful of those Crushers. That's why we don't try to pull too many here. Ascendant goes down, and now we are heading into the one of the last 2 packs of the dungeon. So we're heading into the Ascendant and the Voidstone first. The main reason for this is because this will allow us to start the boss RP. While it isn't a massive time loss to do this pack last, it makes more sense for us to save that extra little second that we do need to be able to go right into boss, instead of waiting for it to spawn, getting knocked back, and then trying to get into position where we can just go once we're done with all the trash here. Now, what we could have also done, and I'm going to spoil a little bit in the future, we should have chained the last pack onto boss once it was low. We ended up holding off, but yeah, it was that was probably the only little time save we probably could have gotten in this run. And so right now we're at 20 minutes and 40 seconds on the timer in a 29-minute dungeon. So we still have about 8 minutes left. Ideally, we want to be on the boss by the 6:37-minute mark. The more time we have, the better, because Outlaw Rogue is extremely inconsistent. What a lot of rogues end up doing in this key is they after the second boss, they hearth out, or they port out to the start of the dungeon. They will go sub, and then they zone back in and they sprint to the pack we're on. It's that pack right after second boss. You don't need a multiple DPS there. If you have one of your rogues, or both of your rogues in this case, swap sub. Not that sub does crazy damage on this fight, but it's very consistent for the burn phases, which is what you need. And that's the problem with Outlaw Rogue, is that it's just inconsistent with its burns. Like, a lot of our burns are going to be like sub 20% value on the boss, maybe even around that 15% mark. So we're going to need lots and lots of burns. Now, as you saw, we got knocked into this pack. When the boss spawns, it knocks players away. We actually bricked a 20 earlier in the week because our shaman got knocked off the edge and couldn't get back up, which was obviously super, super problematic. The one other thing you need to note on this pull is that these Voidstone melees, the big rock man, they cleave. So ideally, your melee don't want to be standing on the tank. Tanks, you don't want to be strafing around too much. Right now, I have 17 stacks of this healing absorb. Luckily, Celestia Brew ignores that healing absorb, but for me, I'm going to try to create some distance here from these mobs so I can drop my stacks eventually. But what should have happened is we should have went into boss right after this Unleashed Darkness. So I'm still sitting at 20 stacks, and we finally dropped because of their spell queuing, and we're good. So I should have gone in now, but it's fine. Like, the pack ended up dying. We have 6 minutes and like 30 seconds basically to get this key done. And I'm not going to bore you with the entire boss fight because it's very long and I don't want to talk about it that long. But some of the strategies that you can use as a tank finishing up the season is, first off, if you don't know, you can dodge the frontal. This has been common knowledge for a while, but I've seen some tanks not know. Ling's Spirits allows me to avoid it in this situation by pairing with our rogue, CL. So as long as he's in a safe spot, I just port to him immediately and I don't have to waste a global to place down a Transcendence. Now, the big thing that I'm trying to optimize here is really my energy spending. If I can, and it's a little bit RNG, but I want to try to line up any shadow procs from Shado-pan to line up with the shield bursting. So luckily right here, I got the Flurry Strikes right before we phase. Unfortunately, it is not the shadow damage proc, so my damage is going to be pretty low. Now, one other thing I'm also going to be doing is standing in the poop on the ground. There's not a lot of healing that's required on this fight. I have a lot of solid defensives to utilize to keep myself alive. During this phase, I can also be in the range of my healer without griefing the group. So I'm trying to proc my tier set bonus to empower my blackout kicks. And on top of that, because I'm actually going to be taking damage in that phase instead of not taking damage, I can purify, giving me stronger Celestial Brews to mitigate damage during this phase. And I'm getting special delivery kegs as well to obviously do some big damage. Or I guess it's like little damage, but it's really min-maxing the amount of damage that I can do. And so right here, I do have a shadow proc, but unfortunately it's going to go into the shield. It's not a big deal. We do want to break the shield as fast as possible so we can do damage during the burn phase, because that's kind of the key to this fight for this comp, is maybe your burns don't need to be great, but getting through the shield quickly will halt a lot of the mechanics. It'll give you more overall damage to get onto the boss. So we're basically, our rule of thumb is just send cooldowns as fast as we can. Now, I believe at the end of the key we were talking, and our warrior was saying that he actually tried something different by holding CDs for one of the burns instead of sending on the shield, and that actually grieved because he could have gotten extra use of CDs here. Not right here in this moment, but I think earlier in the fight or later in the fight. Luckily, Shadow Damage proc came out here, and I was able to do a little bit more. We're now sitting at 1.72 million damage single target for this fight. And this is our third burn, and the boss is at 56%, by the way. Or maybe that was our second burn. Either way, I believe it was our second burn, actually. Was it their second? I don't remember. I lost track already. But our boss is still sitting at 56% health. So this fight, as you can see, our rogues are kind of doing drastically different damage. And that's the problem with rogue on this fight. Despite how good the player is at playing Outlaw, it sometimes literally comes down to a dice roll. There's another problem with this fight too, is that sometimes these shards can be very melee unfriendly, that the melee or the DPS just popped right there. Sometimes they spawn out of melee range, which is also extremely problematic for a composition like this. So we lose damage, we lose uptime. That means we don't have the greatest uptime on buffs, which then further hurts our damage. And so just a lot of issues. Anyways, the shield is about to break now for the third time, or fourth time. I lost count. I think it's third. And we're going to try to get damage out here, or as much damage as we possibly can. So the hope is that not on this burn, but on the next burn after this, we get to like sub 30%. When we can get him to sub 30%, that means our warrior actually gets a little bit of execute damage. It's not a lot, but it can make the difference. Now, luckily, another shadow damage proc came out here at the very, very end. I don't know if that actually was able to get the double damage value, but as you can see, I tilted my camera up to see the percent or read it better, and we're still sitting at 37% health. So we have about roughly 2 burns left to kill the boss. So on the next burn, we need to do about 400 million damage per burn, with each of those shield cycles only being about 45 seconds. So here we go, the next Oblivion wave is coming out. I'm going to roll off to the side. And then if I really want to min-max my stacks, I can try to stand in the poop for a little bit. That's on the ground. But I actually don't risk it here because I got a proc. And so now we're able to dump a little bit bigger blackout kick damage. CL, who's playing on my side, dropped a pool for me nice and close. So I don't have to like go all the way over to diamond just to try to get a tier set proc. And we are just trying to spend as much energy as possible to really maximize our flurry strikes. So the shadow damage is proc there, unfortunately a little early because the shield just now broke and we're getting damage amp. But at the same time, I can't really halt because then I wouldn't even get the shadow damage at all because it was about to expire. So right here we go from 36% and I believe we push it to about 17%, which is not great because if you think about it, that is like just fucking equal. Actually, it might be a little lower. Oh, 16%. Fucking W. So 321 mil. A minute 15 on the timer. Shield at 87% and dropping fast. You can see the percent kind of right below my target frame on the right-hand side of my character. That shield needs to break around the 20-second or 15-second remaining mark because the burn is about 20 seconds long. And so we need about 20 seconds to burn the boss because if he gains a shield, the key's over anyways. It doesn't matter. There's nothing we can do. I wish they made this boss a, like, when he's sub 15 or sub 20%, he doesn't gain a shield anymore, but you also don't get damage amp phases. I think that would have been a good solution. Or he gains the shield at certain health thresholds. So, for example, like at 100% health, obviously, he starts with 1, then at 66% health, and then at 33. They could have done this fight so much better. This is probably my least favorite fight of the entire season, and another reason why I'm very eager for this season to be over. Accompanied a couple of other dungeons in this dungeon pool, as well as a terrible Brewmaster tier set. So here we are, the final burn starts. We are now having to burn a little less than 300 mil because we got some damage before the burn happened. We are up against the clock, 10 seconds remaining, 100 million damage left needed to be done here. 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 40 mil. We apply the touch of death, and we time the key with 3 seconds remaining. We were having a great time in this key. We were laughing our asses off at the end of the dungeon. I was yelling at CL to roll better. It was just a very fun run. And that is how we timed a 20 Rookery with 2 Outlaws and a Fury Warrior. Talk about an ultimate target capped comp. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary. Best of luck the rest of the season. It is now officially wrapping up, and keep an eye out for a lot of new videos coming soon. Anyways, thanks so much, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.